Have you ever been stuck on the road with a flat tire? Well, let me tell you, it's a situation no one wants to find themselves in, especially when you're traveling thousands of miles in your trusty Delano RV, or as I fondly call it, my Tiburon Sprinter diesel. On a cold night miles away from civilization, the last thing you want to hear is the thud of a flat tire. It's like a punch to the gut. You're cruising along, enjoying the hum of the engine, when suddenly you're not. It's jarring, it's confusing, and more than anything, it's frustrating. You see, I was armed with ALA and GoodSams for on-the-road emergencies, feeling pretty secure in my backup plan, but when push came to shove and I found myself in a pickle, ALA fell short. They claimed it was too late at night and they didn't have the right equipment to change the tire on my RV. Can you believe that? A road assistance service that couldn't assist on the road. So I turned to GoodSam's. They suggested I park at a nearby gas station and promised to send out a replacement tire. I had my doubts, you see. I knew my tire was not damaged, but they insisted. And so I waited. The night grew colder, the gas station lights flickered, and the silence of the night was only punctuated by the occasional hoot of an owl. The situation was far from ideal, but I was hopeful. After all, help was on the way. Or so I thought. And there I was, stranded at a gas station, waiting for help to arrive. Little did I know, the night was only going to get more interesting. But I'll save that story for the next scene. Now, you'd expect that a flat tire would be an easy problem to solve, right? Well, buckle up, because this tale takes a turn. I dialed up GoodSam's, confident that they'd come through. After all, they're the go-to for on-the-road emergencies. But their solution, well, it was a bit off the mark. Picture this. It's late, you're stranded at a gas station, and the cavalry that shows up suggests you need a new tire. Now, I'm no mechanic, but I know my Delano RV like the back of my hand. I'd clocked thousands of miles in my trusty Tiburon Sprinter diesel, and I knew for a fact that my tire was sound as a bell. But would they listen? Not a chance. So there I was, watching them roll in a brand new tire, all shiny and unnecessary. It was like watching a doctor perform an appendectomy when all you had was a stomach ache. Sure, it would solve a problem, but not the problem. It was a classic case of missing the forest for the trees. You see, it's not uncommon for folks to overlook the small stuff. They see a flat tire and automatically think the tire's the issue, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the little things that make a big difference, like a $10 valve stem, but we'll get to that in a bit. As they hoisted up my RV and started to replace my perfectly good tire, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of frustration. Not just because I was watching a needless procedure unfold, but because I knew that at the end of this, I'd still be stuck. And sure enough, once the new tire was in place, the problem was still there, as clear as day. But even after the tire was replaced, the problem persisted. It was clear that the real issue was not the tire. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. So, if it wasn't the tire, then what was the problem? I hear you ask. Well, prepare yourself for a twist. The real culprit was not the tire, but the plastic valve stems that were giving way. Now you might be wondering, what's a valve stem? Quite simply, it's the small protruding piece on your tire that you connect an air pump to inflate your tires. It's a small part, but oh, it can cause big problems. Sprinter dualies, like my beloved Delano RV, are notorious for this issue. And it's not surprising. These valve stems are made of plastic, and over time, they can crack or break. Think about it. These tiny pieces are under constant pressure, bearing the brunt of the weather, road salt, and more. It's a tough job for a small piece of plastic, but here's the trick. This issue can easily be overlooked. Many times when a tire goes flat, the first suspect is always the tire itself. A nail on the road, a sharp stone, or just wear and tear, it's easy to put the blame on them. But sometimes it's not the obvious suspect that's to blame. It's the silent, unassuming valve stem that's the real offender. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're ever in a similar situation with a flat tire and no visible damage, consider checking the valve stem. Look for cracks or signs of wear and tear. And here's the good news. Replacing your valve stem is an easy task to do, even if you aren't a mechanic. New valve stems cost about $10 to repair if you do it yourself. If you bring it to the shop, it will cost about $30. So don't let a tire company rip you off and sell you a tire when all you need is a valve stem. Remember, sometimes it's the smallest parts that can cause the biggest problems. Turns out the real villain in our story was a tiny plastic valve stem. So, how do you solve a problem like a faulty valve stem? Well, it's not as daunting as you might think. Even if you're not a mechanic, this is something that you can easily handle yourself. First, you'll need to get your hands on a new valve stem. They're pretty standard, so you won't have to worry too much about finding the right one. You can get these from your local auto parts store, or even online, and the best part, they cost about $10. Yes, you heard right. Only $10 to solve a problem that could otherwise cost you a new tire. Now, onto the process of replacing the valve stem. You'll need to start by removing the tire from the rim. This might seem like a big task, but with a little bit of elbow grease and the right tools, it's quite doable. Once the tire is off, you'll be able to see the valve stem. Use a valve stem tool to remove the old faulty valve stem. It's a simple unscrewing motion. Now, take your new valve stem and screw it into place where the old one was. After that, it's just a matter of putting the tire back on the rim, inflating it to the correct pressure, and you're good to go. Of course, if you're not comfortable doing this yourself, you could take it to a shop. But keep in mind, they'll charge you about $30 for what is essentially a $10 job. In the grand scheme of things, this is a small task. But when you're out on the road, a faulty valve stem can cause a big headache. So take the time to learn how to replace it yourself. It's a small investment of time and money that can save you a lot in the long run. And just like that, a $10 valve stem solved what seemed like a big problem. So what's the takeaway from this experience? Well, my friends, our journey with the Delano RV, affectionately known as the Tiburon Sprinter Diesel, has led us to understand a few key things. The most important of which is knowledge is power. And in this case, it's the power to save you time, money, and potentially a whole lot of hassle. You see, we discovered quite unexpectedly that the real culprit of our on-the-road emergency wasn't a flat tire as initially suspected. It was in fact something far less dramatic and much easier to fix. The plastic valve stems, a small but mighty component of our dually tire system, were the root of our troubles. Now, this might seem like a minor detail, but it's one that can have a major impact. These little gadgets, which cost all of $10 to replace, were causing our tires to lose air. And yet, we were almost sold an entirely new tire, something that would have cost us significantly more. It's a classic case of not seeing the forest for the trees. We were so focused on the tire itself, we overlooked the smaller parts that make the whole system work. So here's the lesson learned. Before you rush off to buy a new tire or call in the cavalry, take a moment to understand the problem. It might not be as big as you think, and it could save you from being ripped off by those who might take advantage of your situation. Don't let the size of the valve stem fool you. It may be small, but it plays a crucial role in keeping your tires inflated and your journey on track. In the end, it's about understanding your RV, knowing its quirks, and being prepared to handle the unexpected. Because when you're on the road, knowledge isn't just power, it's peace of mind. Always remember, sometimes the smallest components can cause the biggest problems. Don't let a tire company sell you a new tire when all you need is a valve stem.